So good afternoon and welcome to this Friday afternoon's episode in the Digital Classicist Summer Seminar Series. It gives me a very great pleasure to introduce Thibault Clérice, all the way from King's College London, to speak to us today. And he's going to tell us all about Clotho, network analysis and distance reading on Perseus and Corpus. Thank you.
Thank you. So, today I will present Clotho, which is basically one of my answers to a question I asked during an embedded station this year. So it's not a final product, and I hope it will be enhanced in the few next months / years. Okay, so I had a problem with a word in Latin which is basically lascivius aum, which is a word I struggle to understand the meaning. For example, if you read the dictionary definitions, they are quite light in terms of licentious characteristics. And when I say that, that's because you will find lascivus used to describe the epigrams from Martial, or you will find the Ovidian narrator described by this same word. But on the other hand, sometimes you will find it in non-sexual or non-licentious context at all. Which this kind of definition led me to say, yeah, it might be a question of auto-censorship. I mean, the Gaffio and the Oxford Dictionary are quite old, and at least for the Gaffio, you will, it has been written like early 20th century and updated like 50 years ago, but that's still like before things like gender studies came and pushed us to rethink about our understanding of the Roman culture on this precise question of sexuality. Last thing, I encountered lascivus for the first time actually in a book which is called Lasciva Venus, Petit guide à l'amour latin, which you can translate by Small Guide to Roman Love. And it has been written by Michel Dubuisson, who was actually a really great researcher in Latin antiquity, but I don't understand why Lasciva and Venus. And actually, you will find Lasciva and Venus together only once in the whole corpus of the ancient of LLT, for example, like the ancient from Corpus. And I was wondering if it's something Michel Dubuisson thought would exist and was not expressed, or if it was just like a title that was invented by this author. So, just 3 examples you might want to read. I'm sorry, the translation in French, but first example is, okay, we will actually start from the down. Last example, Martial et Pluviomata, 645. You will find the lascivi cune, and I mean, there is no doubt about which kind of sense lascivus takes in this context. Lascivus cune is kind of, lascivi cune, sorry, is kind of clear. It has some sexual context, at least licentious context. Then the one over it, Licres Dererum Natura 1 to 16. We are talking about small animals, and in this case, like I don't see how you would put some licentious connotation in there. As it might be, it's not our culture, so it's kind of hard to tell, but at first glance, I wouldn't say so. Last example is my favorite, because actually Kikiro has its own translation in the Gaffio. Just because it's Kikiro, you wouldn't use the same translation than for other authors. So I spent some time on this particular bit, and it's the only utterances of Lascivus by Kikiro. It's in a letter to Atticus, and basically he speaks about Epicratem, which is a nickname for Pompey, and actually Epicratem is one of the bad nicknames Kikiro used to talk about Pompey when he was not really friendly with him, like around 58, if I remember well. And you have some kind, like, if you have the whole passage of this text, you will find Pompey described by a Greek nickname, his boots and his way to walk down the street. And it felt to me like, in this context, Lastima could be replaced by Moses, actually. But that was just one of my thought. And you have 3 examples with one in which you could say, okay, it's not sexual at all, like for Pompey, but who knows, actually, because you're in a rhetoric fight here, even if Pompey will probably never read this. So this problem has a context. So an MA dissertation, of course, a renewal of ancient studies. In France, we had the Annales, which is an école de pensée. I have no idea how to translate that. And we began in the 50s, 40s to have this anthropological approach of the ancient Rome. And that's something that did renew a lot or way to understand ancient Rome. Second thing are the gender studies in the late 80s for their first usage for the ancient Rome. I have no older memory of that, and since the end of 90s, early 2000s in France, actually you can start to see gender studies approach of ancient Rome and sexuality. And that did give us a lot of new tool to understand the sexuality of ancient Rome and its system. Other things, there is of course a technical renewal in humanities with the source digitization, which enables then global analysis, corpus linguistic, and distant reading, and so much more actually. But I have not enough space on this slide. And then there is also a renewal of linguistic, which I want to talk about. For example, the stereotypical linguistic, when you try to define a stereotype to understand the word and not actually try to understand what composes the sense of this word. Then there is computational linguistic, which is, of course, has offered us a lot of tools of frequency approaches to the text, and contextual meaning research. Yeah, basically the idea that the context will give us the meaning of a word, and I quote Cedric Harris for that, for the distributional hypothesis. The most precise way of determining a word's meaning is by investigating the meanings of the word that occurs along that word. Okay, so now we have some background, and the question is, how with this background am I gonna answer the question how to translate or to understand Lastima? And my first idea to understand Lastima is actually, let's do some sentiment analysis. And sentiment analysis is a methodology, an algorithm, where you basically compute the product of every word in a sentence to get an index of polarity. So every word, like mostly adjectives actually, and some nouns and some adverbs, have a polarity, and then you compute the product, and you get a sentiment analysis. It's widely used, for example, by companies on Twitter to get how people are talking about their own company. But actually, it doesn't work in Latin. And that was a big issue, because we have Latin who has started with text in like the 3rd century before our era, and then, well, it actually didn't stop. So if you want to create this kind of dictionary, you have a big issue, because when do you take your polarity? And you could do a dictionary by, like, say, 100 years, but we have still an issue because even today, with our own sentiment analysis algorithm, we are not able to have good results on all texts. It's okay if you use it on Twitter, on Facebook, and maybe on 10, 20 years text, but if you go further, you start to have really false positive. So, so it's not possible because of the size of the corpus in terms of time, and we have a bias in our contact with the Latin culture. So even if we could say from this time to this time, it has been positive. What makes you sure that it was positive? Like, what tells you it was positive? So it brings me to the question of alternatives. And the idea is to do sentiment analysis using the exemplar. And by exemplar, I don't speak about the action, but the people who did the actions. So Lucrezia, for example, and Cicero, and people like that, who have up to the 4th century with Saint Augustine, sorry, have quite a stable polarity actually. There is a lot of work, like Alan Gowing, if I remember well, who proves that there has been a use of exemplar to validate, for example, the empire. And basically because of the structure of the rhetoric teaching, those exemplar never changed of polarity. And if they did, it's so small in the end that that's not important. So we have actually something which is stable in terms of polarity over a few centuries because of this culture of the old authors, of these old facts, and because it was really important for the empire to reuse the same models that the Republic did use. So they are actually polarity indicators. We would say that Nero is a positive figure actually in ancient Rome. I mean, for our authors, of course, it's a different question if you get to inscription, for example, who haven't been written by the same people, but authors are from the upper class, and basically the upper class at this time really hate Cicero, not Cicero, sorry, Nero. It has also some kind of really nice things like, which I've called cultural properties indicators. They have genders, they're not alone to give this indication, but they have also social class information, geographical origins, like you could say, if this word is more connected to this word, to Cicero and Nero, and so they are more, Lascivious is more connected to Latin people, so they'll tell us something. And that's the kind of thing which can be interesting, because if Lascivious is actually more bound to Greek personality and Greek location, it does tell us something about this word. It's a way to speak about a culture which is not the Roman one. And etc. because you can find also this word bound to meretricas, like maybe Philaelis, for example, or functions, like philosophers, authors, politicians, and so on. And the other idea, aside of the sentiment analysis via exemplar, is to actually use the basic tools of corpus linguistic and to try to compute and to compare Lascivious with other words in the Latin dictionary to see how this word is clustered with those words. So, for example, I will use for this question a list of words like moral values, in Publicus, in Probus, and this kind of words, but also poetical values like Amoebus, and try to see where Lascivious will get. Is it a moral values? Is it more poetical value? We will see that later. For this purpose of context analysis, I've always taken the sentence as the context, basically. And that's something that might change at some point, because that's kind of hard actually to decide on it. For example, Matt Manson was doing kind of the same thing for the context analysis on some Greek words, takes a 4 words window, but then it's based on recent psychology studies, but it doesn't mean that sentence is righter, because actually sentence can vary from one edition to another. Do you take only the grammatical sentence or the editor sentence? So that's actually the weak point of my whole presentation. If you have any idea, I will be really happy to talk about it. Then, what I present today is not social network analysis, and I want to stress that. It's something that I have called for now cultural network analysis, because you have not only people connected to each other, but words and names. And that's really important, that you can't do a social network analysis with something else than people. So for names you have exemplum, locations, events, like for example religious events like calendar is a proper noun. That's maybe something interesting to keep, etc. Like tribes, actually, the Gallies, Brittonies, that's something that is interesting to keep. And this has a specific relationship format. So normally in social network analysis, you're like, I give you a gift, I make you a gift, and I do something like that. In here you have 3 categories which can be refined, which is basically, is this word, is Lastima was positively connected to this person, or is it negatively connected? So is it qualifying Nero, or is Cicero opposed to Lastima? So this is what you try to tell here. So O is Lastima or any other word connected to the name in your network. If you want to do that, your first thing is you try to identify possibilities. And the thing is, I haven't found any tools which would provide everything I need. Which is not really a surprise, but I would like to point out that there is also a lack of communication, and I'm really happy to see that on Digital Classicist there will be wiki sprint, because 1 month ago I have discovered that there is something called CLTK, which is developed in New York, which is basically a classical language toolkit, and it will provide lemmatization and the function, which are kind of hard to find in Python, for example. And I think there is a lack of communication, so always try to find the tool if this exists, but sometimes they don't. So if you create a tool, add it to the wiki, and I will do that just after the presentation, I promise. I did also the identification of existing tool, and basically I needed a lemmatizing tool. There is Perseus morphological services, LDK for clustering functionalities, and JV for graph visualization, graph manipulation, and graph functionality like computation, which is kind of interesting because it has actually a user interface, which is always like a big thing. And then the point is to connect those tools and to develop the rest. So to do that, I have encountered some difficulties like automatic lemmatization. When you have texts which are not lemmatized, it's kind of hard to find the lemma. So what I did is actually keep all possibilities for every word, and then it's just noise in my data. But I also provide, just for the test, an automatic a probability cleaner. So basically, I will show it just after, but it tried to find, because of the corpus, actually I will talk about it just after. So then, recognizing example and annotating them. I have the issue of rare or poor quantitatively DB. So basically, all my lemmas are not in this database, and how do I do which database I need to use to get all my exemplar annotated with the kind of information I want. And then I have qualitatively poor database like DBpedia. And I love DBpedia, but when you're trying to do something automatic, it starts to be really complicated. And basically, in my results, I tried to use automatically DBpedia, and I found some video games maker in my data, and I found that one Latin persona was living in Texas, I think. And I thought, okay, so I need to do it manually. It's okay for a small corpus, but when you have like 20,000 sentences, it starts to be an issue. And when you have 3,000 lemma to check and you don't have time to, then it starts to be even a bigger issue. There is no polarizing dictionary because I just came up with this idea, and so I need to build it. And annotating alone a big corpus might be difficult, and even more when it's not your job. So let's go to the next thing about automatic annotation. So this is some kind of actually small formula. Sorry, I thought it was bigger. But basically, the idea of all this mathematical stuff is that we are looking for a corpus where for every sentences in which Lastima appears, which means that there should be some kind of context homogeneity, yeah, and which means that if a form of two possible lemmas, if the lemmas have appeared more than the other in the whole corpus, I think that this lemma is right for this form. It's just simple probability, but it helps a lot to clean the mess. And then you can start to see what else is possible, and you can start to do some manual lemmatization if you need. So then I developed the tool, which is available online, but is in the process of being cleaned. And this is the structure of the Clotho pipeline. So this area is the Clotho local tool, which is a Python available in command line. You don't have to go into the code. It will just question what you need. Like, I want to ask about Lastima, it will ask for Lastima. And then you have Clotho web, which I will come to just after that. So the Clotho local pipeline is made of several modules, which makes it quite easy to transform and use for your purpose and add new modules, because basically there is a module for query, so what do I want? And then there is a module of reverse lemmatization, if you have a better word for that, because I can't find the translation from French, but basically I have Lastima, I want all available forms for these words. So Lastima, Lasciwe, Lasciwa, Lasciwu, etc., etc. And then there is a research process, so you give it a corpus, and it gives you all occurrences. Then there is a lemmatization process, which uses Perseus morphological service. For a sentence, it gives me all lemma in this sentence. And then there is the export process. So basically exporting is post-processing of the data. I want to have a dendrogram of the context based on the Euclidean distance, the comparison of the Euclidean distance vectors, or I want a JFE network, or I want a topic modeling tool, whatever you want, it is here. And actually you want to add a plugin, it's 4 lines of code to include it in the whole process, and well, the time you need to develop your own plugin. In the export you will always have the choice of probability, so do you want to apply probability or not, do you want to apply data model converters, and then the export you want. And then there is Clotho web. And Clotho web is basically an interface which will be, which I will talk a little more about, where you annotate manually using Crowdsourcing on your own team, because you can install it in intranet or extranet, internet, and annotate, lemmatize, basically choose whatever you want. Like it's an interface for refining the data automatically imported from Clotho local. So this is how Clotho web looks, and actually it's a project Classicist Aroma, which is the basic option you will have with Clotho web. So you have to click on one word, for example. On which word? Okay, Hercules. And then when you click on one word and you are signed in, you have access to all these possibilities. So you can say about this sentence, actually, is it irony or not, if you want, because you have an available, you can annotate also the root sentence. But then you can annotate, so Hercules seems to be right. So I have a +1 here, but I could give a new lemma. I could mark it as a false positive. I think, for example, this is not a person like Penatis, I think, or Aras, maybe. Dicta for sure is not a person. I should mark it with false positive to erase it from my network. Then I can give it a polarity, -1, -0.5, etc., etc. Annotate it, say it's a person, it's a male, it's a demigod, of God, and then I can give his relationship to Sopitas. So how is Sopitas related to Hercules? Issue with my project is that it didn't really work well. This is the amount of action since the 21st of March, I think. This is me. This is one of my 3 tutors for my MA dissertation, and that's, I don't know, basically. But I have I had last week around 19 users. More than the half have never done any action except login and sign up. And only 2 people have done more than 10 actions. And so you could say it's a huge fail. And that's why I won't present any thing about polarity sentiment analysis, because I haven't any results to try. And so I will talk about maybe what happened. And my idea is actually it's too complicated. Some action in this thing, I mean, except sentence annotation, maybe relationship, and maybe and for sure lemmatization. All the rest could be done without any Latin knowledge. Like for the polarity, well, we will discuss that. But saying that Hercules is a man, for sure you don't need to be a Latinist and have an MA degree in Latin or in classical studies. So that means that in those kind of actions, I have something that can be crowdsourced another way. Just indication of the workflow. I'm sorry, it's in French. I haven't updated the workflow for English purpose, but basically that's all action you will find. And the issue is, in my project, I have 1 page for all actions, which makes it difficult for the user to understand and to use the interface. So the idea is actually to go another way. I want to keep this interface and try to engage with the classicists who are available, either students or researchers, but I want also my database to be better. And if I can't troll myself Wikipedia, I can ask for people to do it for myself. And what's better than a quiz game on Facebook? And that's basically the idea. Like, I say Facebook, it could be anything else. But basically the interface would get really simpler. You connect, and then you have only 1 question. And you click or you pass. I don't really care. And you can trade, but if the question is, in the Roman culture, key hero is a man. Okay. And then you get some experience, and you can play against your friends, and you can share that you are a racer. And that's really important because we are talking about gamification, and we're talking about non-researchers, we can see actually gamification as a barrier to their participation to a crowdsourcing project, according to Market and Stewart and research engaging with the crowd in the humanities. So basically, in this interface, I don't really care because I'm the target owner are not the academics. It's the crowd. It's far more leisure, and actually, I would be pleased if they cheat because they annotated according to the data from the Wikipedia, which I can get the cleanest way. So that's an idea of how to get data. Analysis results and possibilities. I have made the traditional analysis of Lastima, and I got to a point where there is two views. One is with what I have called infants, basically animals, and puer. I have grouped them in the category, and basically that's because they are not civilized. And when you use Lastima with this word, it seems to be kind of neutral, like maybe positive. And then there is the rest of it, which is the civilized people, the adults. And when you find Lastima with them, then it starts to be a really bad thing. And it can be reused, used positively to mark your differences, like in the oven corpus, but in the end it will be badly looked at. That's actually what I got from my traditional reading. And actually, it tends to be approved by the digital one. And I have more questions with the digital one. So that's some kind of output you can get from from the Clotho local tool. So that's basically a component analysis. And Lastima is here. It's kind of hard to read. And it's just next to armor and latus. Labor is here, that's a false positive, and you have amoenus here, and you have some kind of poetical topos. That's actually a query for the corpus from up to the 2nd century of our era. So that's one of the outputs you can get. That's another network. I won't get into details because, well, it's really big, and the issue is that it's not annotated. And there is no point to having a network if it's not annotated. That's why I am not able to give you as much as I would have liked to about this question of network analysis. But you can see some kind of clusterization, like indeed Lastima is not connected with everything, and you can see, for example, superbus and impious are really big. Superbus is one of the words in my analysis which have the most connection to exemplar provenance, which is not so surprising actually. It has more than one provenance for a sentence. Sorry. In each sentence, you will, with superbus, you will find around 1.30 provenance, which means that you will find a lot of provenance next to superbus, which is not really a surprise, but you can then compare it with Lastima, which have something like 0.5 provenance per sentence, which means that there is less reality hanging around Lastima than superbus. Which is not surprising again, sorry, because superbus is really used a lot in rhetoric actually, and in history, and there is Tarquinius, like its nickname. So of course it's modified a little the results, but it's kind of interesting to know that Lastima is less connected to real people, real places. Dendrogram, that's kind of the results you will get. So Euclidean descent vectorialization, clusterization, I don't remember which algorithm right now. But you have the moral values here. So sterilis, saculagus, impius, prodigus, superbus, ordinus, serius, luxuriosus. Aurus perniciosus neferitus improbus probus honestus topis. You have improbus and probus connected together. That's really, the explanation is quite simple. It's based on the context, and what it tells is that improbus and probus are based on the same values. So it's normal to find them in the same context. Then in the top you have lascivus, amoenus, and femineus. The rest of it are actually false positive. Why I do say that they're false positive? Because they are under 60 occurrences. And the word in this graph starts to clusterize in different groups only after at least 100 occurrences. So every other word that it's over on 100 occurrences are either here or here. For the group, the upper group, you have only 3 words over 100 occurrences. In the future, optimization of the code. For this dendrogram I have shown, it took me 20 hours to do the lemmatization and 20 hours for the dendrogram, which is quite a long time, and I'm sure I can get better results. LNC cache system. Avoid MySQL and listen. This tool is, the idea of this tool is to provide an easy interface and installation to classicists who might not be developers. And I know that if I say to someone you have to install MySQL, and if he is not a developer, he will start to say, yeah, well, not sure. If it's only Python, maybe it will go. Not sure either, but at least avoiding the needs of dependencies is a good thing. And MySQL is kind of easy to install, but it's still not that. And Lucene is really hard to install on with a Python pipeline, basically, because you have to compile everything yourself. So I need to see how to replace those items. I have to improve the lemmatization and do some kind of name recognition enhancement. I had it at some point, and it failed after I went to Perseus morphological services. But basically, my lemmatizer right now get me Marcus and Kikiro. What I want is Marcus T. Kikiro. And what I want even more is, if you find Kikiro and Marcus T. Kikiro, that's the same person. And I want them as the same node in my graph. I want a new interface for the crowdsourcing tool. I want better annotation for my network analysis, but then I want annotators actually. New models. Context choice. For now you have no choice about which context do you get. I want to be able to provide the option to get an N-word window around lascivus or any other term. I want to be able to provide tree tagging, weighting, so if this word is has the same case and the same role than lascivus, then it's weighted higher in my graph. And why not n-gram? Like every possibility you want. If you want only like 2-3 gram instead of the sentence. So you will get the 3 grams available instead of the whole sentence. New algorithm, log likelihood ratio is kind of an interesting statistical tool. I'm looking into it right now because right now I'm using TF-IDF. Vector sums, that's something which is really interesting that my customer is working in Anvers, no, in Ghent. And basically he's using it for comparing persons, and basically it says that if you have a king, you retrieve male from it, you will get queen. And the idea is to use it with lascivus. If I have the context of lascivus and the context of polus, how to get the context of, sorry, if I get the context of molus, what do I have to retrieve or add to get the context of lascivus? And that's some kind of interesting question. It does not provide me a definitive answer, but that gives me a new lead to look into my close reading. And new methodologies, topic modeling by term and topic modeling by corpus. So if I do see that the elegiac are using Lastima in different ways than the other, I want to be able to compare topics in both corpus. And of course I want to complete the sentiment analysis as soon as the dictionary is available. Sustainability of the whole thing. And it will be my conclusion. I need to do some code cleaning. I need some instruction and docs. Not to get it to Python 3, but the most important thing is data. And I have put it here. I am in discussion with Perseus team to see how do I get my data to be saved. Because after Lastima get finished, what do I do with the data? Honestly, I am paying myself the hosting services and I won't pay it for 20 years. So there will be one day when it won't be available anymore. So the idea is to see with Perseus how to modularize my own work. And actually, Perseus has a lot of data I will be interesting. Last year we have seen Marika Borlio speaking about the Perseus project, and they have pre-banking done by students. But it's not available right now. And they are building tools, web services, so I could get it directly into Clotho Local or Clotho Web. But as a fair exchange, Clotho Web and Clotho Local will share with them the data. And basically, Perseus will be the center of backing up the data of every Clotho Web project. So, for example, Lastima Roma, when we are done, we know that all the data will be either in the Perseus lemmatization or the text itself for the lemmatization. No, sorry. Perseus lemmatization and morphology service will have new data. We are trying to think about the exemplar DB, how to implement it into Perseus. That's the trickiest question, I have to say. We have to see also how to behave with those services, the Pelagios for the places, and DBpedia. There is data in there. And I know I wouldn't need some of my annotators to do all the work if I could get all those services to discuss together. And that's the point of our discussion with Perseus right now. We'll try to see also, because Clotho Web is not only Lastima Roma, how to make sure that every Clotho Web instance could discuss with Perseus and could see its own data saved. Because of course I'm using Clotho Web for a crowdsourcing project for Lastima. But what if you want to use it on the idea of the rhetoric in the Latin corpus, or the Greek corpus, because it's also possible to do that in Greek. And basically there is no, it would be a shame if all the data you have done will be saved. So we're looking to do some kind of partnership with Perseus to save this data. And that's really important because if you have even only 1,000 annotations, that's 1,000 annotations that someone won't have to do another time. So that's about the collaboration which are in perspective. I'm trying to see with the CLTK developer how I can provide him some of the tools I have developed. I'm discussing with Perseus about the data sustainability. So CLTK is more for the process sustainability. I'm discussing with Mark Manson from Leipzig to see how to enhance the Python sustainability, like can I how to add new algorithm and how to see if he can work with me a little on this project in the future and be sure that it still works. Future benchmarking as well. I would like, when I have enough data to compare and see how my results are compared to other research. The issue is with Lastimos, I have no other research that relies on. Nobody likes Lastimos except me. Apparently, the crowdsourcing tends to approve this position, but so that's something I want to do. And the conclusion, connecting the existing tool, providing a pipeline to everyone. No, there is a tool if you're able to do Python and you have a precise question about a few words to do your corpus linguistic in Python. And if you have a precise question, a precise export you need, you just have to add it in the pipeline. The fact is you don't have to develop the rest. And if you develop a module, it will be available for everyone if you want, and that would be lovely. So you don't need to create your own tools. There is already tool existing, and the one which were available, they are already in the Clotho local. More open corpus, better results. I got a difference of around, I think, 10,000 sentences when I came from Perseus project library to LLT. By the way, if you're interested, I have a Python working LLT PDF converter to JSON. It took me a few hours to get it, but that's really interesting because, as you know, LLT doesn't provide any API. But it did change the results a lot, mostly because Perseus doesn't have every word from Augustine, and that's a big issue, while he is one of the biggest user of this word in the late empire. Those methodologies do not provide answer, but they do something a human brain is not able to. I don't know for you, but I'm not able to remind every concurrency there was in 20,000 sentences. But it's not because it's clustered with Amoenus and Ephemenius that it is the definitive answer. It's just a tool, so you get further and try to understand why there was this question, there was this result in the dendrogram. And then with better annotated corpus, sentences, network, corpus and sentences, you get a better network. And that's the machine can't do. And that's something I'm also looking for with Perseus. There might be a chance that it will be available, but basically you have the issue with the network of non-express subjects. And most of all in Latin, like, maybe in this sentence, Cicero was a subject, but he is implied, he is not expressed. And that's a big issue when you're trying to do a network analysis. So the thing is, perceived as this kind of tool to say, the subject of this word is not expressed, but it's Cicero. And that's something I want to get. And that's something I want my user to annotate, and that's something I want perceived to get as well. So the machine can do that. It's not possible to know who is the subject. You need a human brain. At least for now, maybe one day. But we might not have one job anymore. So thanks, and here is all the links you might need. I'm not sure I have time for more demonstration, but Lastima Roma for the Crowdsourcing project, Clotho local for the Python tool, Clotho web for installing your own Clotho web interface, and Twitter and email address.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much. What I particularly liked is that you're very, very clear about the things that didn't work and why those. And this, of course, is so important in the research context because you need to still be clear to other people so they don't go down the same pathways. An obvious question is, how long have you been spending on this project? I mean, you spoke about the MA, but clearly this has been going on for some years, yeah?
No, it's actually an evening job and weekend jobs, and I have not slept a lot in the last 6 months.
Okay.
But it started, this theoretical question started like in October, I think, and the programming started in December.
Okay, so this is all since you started at King's?
Sorry?
This is all since last year?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But it was not my job, so it's possible to do stuff if you have no life, no side of it.
Yeah, well, Very, very well done. Can I ask you, what is corpus? What's the extent of the corpus that you're using?
I'm
so
sorry,
thinking particularly about some of the different types of analysis. For instance, like with the sentiment analysis, you're going to get a great variety of results depending if you're using historical texts, letters, or poetic texts. Is this the full corpus of extant Latin that you're using here?
I'm using the full corpus which is available on Perseus. But the thing is, I am also in the process to provide a grouping tool in Perseus to say this author is historical genre, and then you can do computation depending on the author or the genre or this kind of information. So it's actually quite important to do this kind of comparison. Even if in the end it's the same results, I want to be able to know that it's different.
Yeah, with that type of analysis, being a long-term student of it, you're going to get, for the example you had in there when you're saying is this irony or not, right? If it's a historical writer or if it's Ovid, you're going to get completely different results. You're going to get all that irony, all that satire in the poetic text, and hopefully not in the Caesars and the Livies. I don't know. Yes, anybody else? Yes,
can I ask if you had much chance yet to work with the CLTK alpha? I mean, it looks like it has the potential to be very useful indeed.
Honestly, I didn't have a chance to really use it because I discovered it, I think 1 month ago, and I was in the process of writing the last pages of my dissertation. But I've been discussing with I think his name
Kyle Johnson.
Yeah, Kyle Johnson. Yeah, and he seemed to be really looking to develop this tool, and we are discussing to which extent I can help. It seems to be rather well done, but well, to be honest, I really like the idea of CLTK, and most of all for the lemmatization. But the fact is, with Perseus work on the morpho services, it might be way more interesting to have a web connection and to have newest results available than a standard non-moving corpus, a dictionary. And I think that will be the issue with CLTK for the lemmatization part. I'm looking forward for the other languages which are not supported with Perseus, because K.O. Johnson wants to do also like ancient Arab and a lot of languages. I think there is a list of 30 old classical languages, and I'm not able to help on any other than Greek and Latin, but that will be interesting for the lemmatization. And I don't really know for the other tools he's trying to provide. I think the Corpus tool will be interesting. Right now he's using Perseus for the main languages, Latin, Greek, but for the other I have no idea. And I think it would be a really nice tool for the other languages, to be honest. And a simple toolkit for Latin and Greek, which is, you know, when you don't develop by yourself, it's always interesting to have something which is already here.
I mean, the stuff he's released so far seems to be, I mean, it's quite, they're doing quite different, often quite different tools for Latin and for Greek. I don't know if he's actually got any standard set of functions that he wants to do across all these different languages. But I mean, the Latin tools seem to be quite well developed. I haven't tried.
I think the Latin is quite developed. I haven't looked at the Greek, to be honest. And for the rest, that's just in the wishes from this developer. And of course it will be interesting to see how he integrates corpus tools and linguistic tools. But for now I haven't had the time to see any, and I'm not sure he's in the process to provide those one for now.
I think crowdsourcing is a problem, it's a thing. I mean, it needs its own kind of consideration and contemplation. And the challenge with crowdsourcing always is, if somebody has half an hour spare, why would they do this? And that's the problem, actually. The rest of it, there are a few other things like are they competent and will they be useful is another thing. But incentive, and clearly you're starting to move toward can I do it as a competition? Can I do it, you know, what's the reward? Why would people do it? And either you make it fun or you find out some other kind of reward. I remember hearing a presentation on the transcribing Bentham project. And they started with a lot of enthusiastic people. That's in English, makes it easy. Most of whom then disappeared. I think they constructed a scheme of rewards. So if you've done, you know, 100 entries, you get called a duke or something like that. I can't remember what there was a label, some kind, the equivalent of putting a gold star in your book at school. I mean, that's the, you know, that's the primitive training we all get in rewards. And so I think it's interesting to know what to explore that. But I think exploring how to make crowdsourcing work is a project in its own right. I'm very interested to see whether one of the ways to do it is working with groups of students, working with people teaching students and saying to them, would you find, is this something that you could use with your students which would help them in their study of Latin?
So, I have actually a lot of things to say to what you just said. There was a really basic reward process as a Duke system, like you could become the consul, if you were the best annotator.
Yes.
But I also think I have received a lot of mails saying, oh, your product is so nice and so on, from non-digital classicists, from gender studies people and friends, and I've never seen them signed up. Yeah. And sometimes I have users who signed up and never did a thing. And that's when I think there is also an issue with the definition of the interface. And well, gamification is of course a thing I want to look at for the Facebook interface. But the issue is if I add too much gamification in the lemmatization process, then I lose the academics. Because for some it's really a restraint. And then the student, I totally agree, and I have been discussing with people the day before yesterday in Leipzig to see how this kind of project will be integrated in lectures. And the issue here is that you can exclude the high school, because we were talking about sex here, and you could get some issue with some parents. But for sure, in universities that might be interesting, but then there is a question of how do you integrate it in your own lectures? And that's one of the things I really want to see how it goes with the Perseus team, because with the e-portfolio, for example, they are creating with Perseus, there might be a way to get something for the student and for the teacher to look at, to evaluate the work of the student and to reward it in terms of his lecture. And right now it's not possible. You have your own history, but your teacher doesn't have access to it. And that's one of the directions we want to look